Okay, and I'm back now with Elizabeth. So let's go ahead and take a look at her statement. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this one. We've got a waterscape, a series of water pictures, and very interesting that it appears as though you've chosen to go black and white with this. The first thing that well, probably the first thing my eye is drawn to is the focal point, which is that fountain right there. And, she's very, very clearly used the rule of thirds, to put that water fountain, yeah, that water spray just right there. I don't think it would hurt much if you were to maybe shift the horizon and the fountain down just a little tiny bit. But the reason being, I'm glad that you left a lot of room. We talked about, hey, if there's an interesting sky, let the sky dominate. If there is an interesting ground plane, let the ground dominate. And, that's what she's done here. Very, very interesting. Just for a little tiny bit more balance, what one thing is that I feel about like things with edges touching, either leave some space between an object and the edge of the frame or go ahead and crop it, but don't just kind of be on the fence with it, because it just, I think it would look good if the top of your frame was about to where the top of my cursor is right now. It wouldn't cost you a lot. You'd maybe lose, like, say, from here down, or just maybe slightly repositioning. I just feel like even though you're very, very clearly adhering to the rule of thirds, remember that that is a guideline. It's not like an exact measurement. And so if it feels right, to shift it a little bit one way or the other, it still complies. But sorry about that. But I think it's a nice image. A lot of room for bringing out some highlights in here. One of the things we need to work on in black and white photography is we really lose a lot of detail in areas once they start to get real dark. And when you guys are reading about the zone system in Ansel Adams' work, you'll because your next project is black and white, so you'll get a chance to learn how to make areas like this look a little bit better. Okay, and I'll probably say the same thing here. I don't think that this one is as interesting as this. It seems to me the water is a little bit blown out here. This one has a lot more stuff going on. A lot more interesting reflections, which I do also think you could play up a little bit. I think that you could kind of darken some of those a little bit. This one does not seem to have the drama for some reason. It's almost the same composition, but kind of a mirror image of it. You've kind of moved to the other side of the pier a little bit, and in this particular case, since the water it isn't really all that interesting. Perhaps it would be if you came in and like did some burning on some of the shadows and midtones, to sorry about that, to exaggerate the texture. That's something you could do, but it's just feeling a little bit like you've taken most of the information in the picture and tried to kind of cram it all up in here. So again, I really appreciate that you are very strictly adhering to that rule of thirds. But you know, again, keep in mind that there's some playroom with that, and so you know, if you need to kind of use little guides on your camera viewfinder, you know, to kind of get it set up, then turn those little guidelines off, and you kind of generally know where your composition is. Now, kind of move your camera around just a little until it feels right. And again, there's really interesting stuff going on in here that I think our eye is really curious about, you know, that we would really like to see. And so it's almost kind of like it's a little bit of a tempting or like a tease here, like, oh, look at this really cool stuff, but you don't get to look at it. Okay. Horizon's crooked on this one, so this would be a pretty easy fix with either Photoshop or Lightroom. If you know, it is sometimes hard to get the horizon just the way you want it, um, but it's just super easy to fix in the editing software. That this one I think could be very interesting if it wasn't so blown out and if it wasn't tilting, because you have an interesting um, silhouette here that I, you know, I think this is the strength of the picture right here is there's almost like a balance happening on the top side of this line and balancing against the bottom side of this line. It's not like a reflection, but this seems to balance this tree out very nicely. The spray from the fountain seems to balance out the texture in these trees very nicely. But it needs the sky and the water around it to draw your eye in. And right now, this is a you know, this is an exposure situation. It's really tricky, you guys. I know it's really tricky to, you know, get it to all work. My thing that I do with landscapes, um, this is just something that works for me. Is I will sometimes intentionally underexpose a little bit when I'm shooting in RAW because that helps me get that darker sky, and it's so easy to come in with, you know, like dodge and burn or you know, with a mask and bring out some highlights in those dark areas. For whatever reason, I find it easier to introduce highlights to an area that's too dark, as opposed to darkening an area that's too light. Now, you could do a little bit of both, but there's a lot going on that we're just really missing out on here. Oh, and this is something that doesn't need to be there. That would be easily fixed with content aware fill. Okay. Okay, this is probably the most interesting one so far. Um, why? Well, you really nailed it on this reflection right here. You know, if anything, I wouldn't mind having you get a little closer, or you know, moving in. If you have a longer possible focal length on your lens, perhaps doing that. Um, this one, I think, just almost hits the mark. You know, we could use a lot more contrast back in here. You don't have to worry about there being so much contrast back here that it's going to be distracting from this, because this is very almost overpowering right here. You know, it's actually a little bit blown out in a couple of areas, and you know, it's tricky, you guys, when you're taking pictures of reflections. They can be incredible. They can take something and make it just really abstract. It's really nice, but you know, just trying to kind of meter so that you get, you know, this area looks beautifully exposed and this area here looks kind of, oh, I wish there was a lot more texture happening over here. So you know, you might want to think about going back on some of these and applying some selective edits to you know, masked off areas, and I think you'll see a huge difference in, you know, taking an average picture and making it look really good. Okay. Got a little bit more sunshine coming out in this one, but I think that this one has better value range than the others. I love the little duck in the foreground, kind of observing everything that's going on. Again, I think that there's a lot of potential for some really cool dramatic texture happening here in the foreground if it had enough value contrast, enough lights and darks to compete with the very, very strong and severe contrast that we have on the pier right here. And I think that's kind of the appeal of this is that the way the light's hitting it, it's so either light or dark. It's very, very contrasty. It's very dramatic in doing that. It might be fun to try a few compositions where I think no matter what you do, you must be in a boat or something. It seems like you're in the water. You're gonna have water in the foreground no matter what. It might be interesting to just play around with a little less of the foreground and a little bit more of your most interesting area. It's kind of oh, I wish there was a little bit more of this. I wish the pier was kind of you know doing this so that maybe you've got say a third here and then another third here for the bottom of the pier, something like that. The little duck looking on, that's great. Okay. This one's really interesting. This one I really like as a composition. The first thing that my eye goes to is this slope, this kind of swooping line that you have right here. And it's really, really nice in black and white. Horizon is crooked a little bit, at least it looks that way to me. Um, there might be some stuff that you could play up along here on the sand. I would probably come and burn some of the midtones just a tad. Might even want to burn the shadows on the water just right along this edge here just to get a little bit more contrast. Just a little tiny bit more drama because again, like in the last one, the light hitting the pier in the background is very strong. It's very, very strong. And therefore that's the thing that everything else in the image has to kind of work around. I like this tree branch coming into the corner here. It's not just like barely peeking in, or it's like really in there. And I love the way that this arc points your eye directly to the the pier, the building or whatever this is. You've got another one of those implied lines. It's really nice. So yeah, so you've done a nice job on these. I appreciate that you've been sticking to the adhering to the rule of thirds. I think maybe you're approaching it a little bit technically, and you're free to loosen up on that just a little bit. Be a little bit more artistic with your compositions. Use the rule of thirds as a starting point, not an end point, and take better advantage of the Photoshop. But and good work going black and white on this one because we really hadn't even discussed it all that much. So I really enjoyed looking at these. Thank you. And so here's our first one. Um, we've got a very kind of a horizontal focus on this one and some repetition. I think this is kind of interesting. These three little signs here, and there's like the two that are kind of together, and then this one over here by itself. It's kind of a fun play on the rule of thirds a little bit. It's a nice image. Probably you know not necessarily the most interesting. You know, when we're using a lot of horizontality, and this is very dominated by horizontal line, um, it it, there's got to be a little something extra in there to, you know, kind of break up the monotony. And you do have that. You've got the signs in here, and you also have an interesting potential silhouette along the skyline with your trees. I'm almost thinking either get closer to the signs or get a little farther away, or something. I'm not sure. There's not really anything wrong with it. It's just could be more interesting. And you know, I think its strong point is there's just something kind of amusing. I'm not sure why, but there's something kind of amusing about these signs here. Okay, wow, 1 point perspective. Okay, that's almost perfect. Um, much more interesting than your first one. I'm sure everybody would agree with that. That it's leading our eye into much deeper space. Whenever we have perspective, we have diagonal lines, and diagonal lines are always dynamic. They always indicate movement, and so you know, I imagine you're standing still when you took this. I don't know. Maybe you took it out of the back of your car, but I hope not. But I think it's very dramatic, and I like the light on this one. You know, this was the perfect weather and the perfect time of day. Like when we have those really kind of dark gray skies, and then everything on the ground is kind of lit up. It's it's just perfect. And so really nice, you know, color balance on this one, and nice composition. Okay. This one I think is also it has potential. I think you're doing something similar where you're using a 1 point perspective, you know, to kind of lure the eye into this focal area here. It's a little bit like, oh well, when I get here, there's nothing to look at. You know, like it seems like this should be framing something, you know, a person. I'm not sure what, but it's a very nice picture. My only other you know thing that I would criticize on this, and this has pretty much been consistent on everybody's, it's so hard to meter for both the sunny area and the shady area. And whereas this part is perfectly exposed, there's a lot of detail that has gone missing in these areas, and that is a super easy fix because you can, you know, selectively with a mask, you know, mask out the whole top part of it where we like our contrast, and just play around with our settings in here using some kind of a brush. It's going to be hard to get a good selection on something as delicate as the edges of these leaves, but I think that this is something that, you know, some dodge and burn or some masking could make all the difference in the world. So that we feel like that we're a little bit more engaged in the picture. You know, we really feel like we're standing on this ground here. The ground plane just does not seem as significant on this one. Okay. Yeah, this one you know, I think you might be onto something with these very simple, um, you know, 1 point perspective things with the roads. You know, a lot of times 1 point perspective um, is very difficult to make it interesting, you know, because they tend to be very symmetrical. And when you've got a very symmetrical balance, and this is almost perfectly symmetrical. In fact, that line just almost goes straight up and down. So you did a great job on like an intentional symmetry. And then there's just a couple of little things in there that throw that symmetry off to give it that variety that makes it not boring. Whoops, you know, the arrow. I mean, it's just I don't know. The road ends, and then you've got this arrow, like you're driving, and then all of a sudden, You have to turn, make a fast turn right now. You know, I had mentioned this in one of the other critiques that the warm colors tend to push forward, and the cool colors tend to recede. And you know, you can really see that effect working here with the yellow signs. That is why signs are yellow, because not only is it scientifically researched to be the color that's the most annoying, or irritating, I should say, to the human eye, well, that means it stands out. And you know, you don't want your road signs to blend in or recede. You want them to get your attention and to really pop forward. And so you can see that the yellows really kind of grab our attention, and then the more subordinated areas are cooler and, you know, tend to kind of recede back. Okay, this is you know, another spin on that 1 point perspective. Um, I don't think it's quite as interesting as the two with the road. I can see where you're going with this one, and I like the narrative that's unfolding. You know, that you've got, you know, here we're standing here on this road, and way down there's this solitary figure, you know, and you've got the road signs even kind of pointing at the figure a little bit. If anything, maybe the figure is a little bit understated. What's happening space-wise is kind of interesting, because it's like you've got a close area here, and then it's like these two bushes here kind of serve almost like as a screen, or like a stage screen, and then there's this middle area, and so from here to here you've got the center ground, and then you can almost perceive these trees as being like a curtain, or you know, like a curtain on a stage. Yeah, that's very stage-like, I guess, and that opens up and then reveals an even deeper space. You know, so you really get the sense of walking through an opening and an opening and an opening. So the idea is great. It's a little dull, maybe because there's just not enough contrast happening. Everything kind of starts to blend together right in here. The sky's a little bit blown out. It's a great idea, and I think it's workable. There's not really anything I would say that's wrong with the picture, other than it just, there's something that is making it not as interesting as it could be. A lot of this could probably also be taken care of by getting some more detail. You know, bringing out some of the highlights like I've talked about on so many of these in the shaded areas. But, you know, you got real close to nailing it on that one. Okay, and then the last one, this is probably your strongest one. This is something I don't believe I've talked to you guys about yet, but it's almost guaranteed to get you a good composition every time. It's called an S curve. If you can get a line that draws a letter S or a letter Z across your picture plane, you're almost guaranteed a fabulous composition, because just the way it breaks up the space. So, you know, good use of the rule of thirds here. This line leads our eye in. Yes, I would like to see, you know, some highlights and some detail, you know, brought out in this area down here. Pick up that glow that happens at that time of day. You know, you appropriately, you know, you exposed for the sky, and if anything, you know, you could possibly even enhance the saturation just a little bit. But I think this is the perfect one to conclude with, also because this car uh, looks to be leaving us. You know, like it's the end of the road. You know, it's over. And this one's really nice. I think that this is probably the best out of all of them. But you've got something. You're hitting on something there that I would like to see you continue to explore. A very simple idea like this can sometimes turn into something really interesting if you spend enough time trying to figure out what you need to do to make it interesting. And that is a challenge, that you're taking something that is potentially very boring as a subject matter, and you are finding ways to make it interesting. And I would encourage you to keep that approach going, because I don't think you've hit it yet. You know, I like to do series, you guys, because we start things start to reveal themselves to us in the process of doing a series. And you know, you start out with one intention, and a lot of times by the time you're into it, your direction has completely changed in a way that you weren't even expecting. And so I would encourage you to not just say, okay, you know, landscapes are done, on to the next thing. Keep doing these. You know, I'm hoping that you guys are planning on continuing to take pictures after you get out of this class, I would hope. So, okay, but nice work. And now on to the concluding page. Okay, so we have a photo series on a horse named Athena. Just the opening this up at the first one, I'm really happy with the way this one came out. Your light looks really good. It's you know, very obviously, even though it's daytime, and you've got very strong shadows, you've got good, you know, contrasty kind of dark blue sky. I really like the, you know, the line that the horse's back makes along that blue sky. You know, never underestimate the potential of what a blue sky can do for a contour edge such as this. But yeah, I feel like you're, you know, good job on your, um, you know, exposure in the foreground and in the background, and you know, the dark areas. You don't seem to have anything blown out, and you seem to have um, fairly good detail coming in through on the dark colors, and that blue just really plays nicely with the paint horse. Okay. Lighting is not as good in this one. You know, let's just kind of go back and, you know, this, see how just, you know, rich and warm the colors are on this. And by comparison, you know, this one is much grayer. You exposed well for the sky, and we've got that beautiful blue sky back there. But you know, I think that we need to mask out the background and bring out some warmth and some highlight in the foreground. The you know, greatest, oops, sorry, the greatest amount of contrast is going to this area right here, and this is almost like creating a little square. Like this should be our focal point, and of course, there's not really much to look at right there. But you know, generally, it's more or less a portrait. So generally, we would say that the face needs to be the focal point, and I'm pretty sure that's the intent. And also, you know, since it is a portrait, um, I think maybe you could get a little bit more personality out of her if we could see one of her eyes, you know, or maybe if her head was up a little bit, or if her ears were pointing forward, or something. It's kind of like you know, I can see her eye in this one, and kind of, you know, get a sense that, you know, she's like a person, you know, has, and here, you know, I just don't get that sense of life, and I think a lot of it does have to do with, you know, just if you're going to shoot the face, definitely play it up in some way, and make it more interesting than the area that is supposed to be, you know, subordinate. Okay, and you know, this one's similar. The composition is not as good. You know, this one, if the light was okay, the composition's pretty good. Of course, I would rather you didn't cut her feet off. You know, Poor thing, right? You know, either really crop it or give them some space, but don't ever just like barely cut something off like that. Just one of those little things you have to learn to watch for. The composition on this one is not as strong. Um, you know, we do have a little bit of the foot cut off here. Again, not quite as much, but I think you seem to be your eye level. You seem to be up kind of high looking down on her. I'm not sure if maybe you're standing up on something. It's probably it's probably not the best angle. You know what I think is interesting about this one um, is what's happening in here. You know, again, I think that we should focus on the face, and I can't really see her eye very well in here. You know, because we're in so much shadow. Um, you know, this might even be a good opportunity to use your flash. You know, this is what we like to use the built-in flash on our camera for when we're shooting in the shade on a really sunny day like that. But I think just repositioning yourself and featuring this is really cool. I know you wanted it to be about the saddle, but the thing that draws my eye to it is the interaction between the line right here and the post. You know, I think if you wanted to take a picture of the saddle, you know, make it a little bit more dramatic. But I think this just has to do with positioning and you know, light more than anything else. Okay, now that's a nice, interesting action shot right there. Um, it's, I think it would be nice if you could get in just a tiny bit closer. I know that's kind of difficult to do. With action, we always want to you know, get as close as we possibly can. Now that said, you know, I really like your foreground here. It's nice and kind of in focus. In fact, I think I wish that maybe this was a little less focused so that this area in here could be more focused. But that said, it also could be that you could just come along and crop this some. You know, I'd rather you get close, you know, because that's you're putting good pixels. You're cutting off perfectly good pixels that could be used for the picture when you crop. But I think that this one has potential. I imagine you did a whole series of her going around like that. I really like the tension between the figure and the horse here. I think tension is really, you know, kind of the perfect word for it because they're connected. The rope is pulled tight so they're connected and kind of at the same time seem to be kind of pulling away from each other a little bit. But it's you know, very indicative of movement. The horse's body, you know, we talk about diagonals suggesting movement. Look at if we drew an imaginary axis line through the horse right here. Just by nature, you know, we lean when we're in motion. You know, her leg has uh, diagonals on it. You know, because she is moving as well, and then she's got the straighter leg, which is kind of a stabilizing element. So yeah, this one's nice. I think it could be a little bit stronger, but this one has a lot of potential. Okay, whereas this one, I just think that your angle is not ideal with the horse. I see what you're doing, and I really like the big blue sky in the background. I think that maybe if you wanted to be like straight on like that, like go ahead and be just like extremely straight on, you know, like where the rider's head is like stacked directly above the horse's head, and you know the feet are all lined up. But otherwise, I think I would get at a little bit more of an angle to elongate the side of the horse a little bit more and to introduce a little bit of negative space in between the figure and the horse. You know, let's go back and look at this one. There's distance between these two, which is making them interesting. Here, of course, we don't have that distance, but what happens is the person starts to basically just the shape kind of just blends into the horse, and it's hard to tell where one ends and where the other begins. And when we've got this perfect clear blue sky like this, it is great for defining negative space. And so I like that got I like the proportional relationship of the horse to the background in this one. I like that the horse is small, and that this seems to be almost more about the sky than about the horse. And also because your focal point is like right in the middle. Generally, I think it would be better, to it's almost symmetrical, but not quite. But some symmetry isn't always interesting. Whereas I think if you stood about to here, where my cursor is, you'd see more space between the horse and the person, and you'd definitely see a little sky in between, and it would put a little bit less space over on this side and introduce a little bit more space over on this side. That's my opinion. But you're getting a lot of success with these ones that are shot in the full daylight. Well, I'm looking at these shadows now, and I'm thinking it's not midday. It's very, very bright, but it is not midday. These shadows are long, so I am assuming it's about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, which is perfect. It's the perfect time. So you've got the sun over here reflecting off the horse. When you're shooting the sky, you have the sun behind you over your shoulder, and therefore your sky is not blown out. So, really taking that to heart, which is good. Okay, now that one I really like. And notice in this one, the horse's ears are pricked up. In all the others, she looks kind of bored, but in here, she is very interested. I love the shallow depth of field, and this one tells a story. Just kind of like this one does. I think that out of all of them, this one really tells a story. It's um, we know what this is about, so your light is nice on this one. Again, look at, if you've got that sun right over your shoulder, you almost just can't go wrong on a day like that. And it's a little bit ironic that the one picture where the horse is kind of perky and actually seems to be engaging with the camera a little bit is the one where she's out of focus because she's not the focal point. But it's kind of funny as well. This one I think is very successful. Of all the ones that you did, but in that area where between the two buildings there, this one I think definitely has the most personality. Okay, so we'll go on and read your concluding statement. I'll leave that up on the screen for a few seconds. And really good job on these. You really nailed it on a couple of them. A couple of them, I hope I gave you some good things to think about. The next time you go out, and keep taking pictures of your horse. They're just going to get better the more practice you get.